A heartbroken cowboy took in a broken girl, only to heal, never knowing she'd capture his heart. The first hint of danger was not the rifle crack, but the splintering porcelain of Ethan Carter's coffee mug. One moment the Nebraska dawn lay silent, frost silvering the buffalo grass, chimney smoke curling lazy white into a cloudless sky. The next a slug whistled past his ear and blew the handle clean off the cup, brown liquid hissing across the porch boards. Instinct born of countless lonely mornings took command. Ethan dropped to one knee, shoulders folding tight, Winchester already in hand before the broken china finished skittering across the planks. He scanned the rolling prairie from behind the porch post, lungs searing with the sudden rush of cold air. Nothing moved but the wind bending the tall grass into rippling currents. Yet the echo of that single shot rang in his bones like a church bell tolling danger. 3 years of widower's solitude had taught him that on this frontier, silence was a liar, and bullets seldom traveled alone. 5 cautious minutes later, he eased down the steps, boots muffled by the brittle grass. The smell of mesquite from last night's embers lingered on his coat as he skirted the barn and outbuildings. Then he saw her horse, a pinto mare lathered white, flanks heaving, reins dangling as though the rider had abandoned them mid-gallop. Ethan's brows knit. Horses don't spook and gallop to exhaustion without reason, and reasons out here usually carried spurs or a whip. A soft groan drifted from behind the woodpile. Rifle leveled, Ethan advanced, every sense taut. What he found froze him harder than the morning chill. A slight figure lay crumpled in the shadows, men's clothes 2 sizes too big, draped over bruised shoulders. Mud-streaked hair, unevenly hacked as if by a dull knife, clung to a face mottled purple and yellow. "Please, don't send me back," the stranger whispered, voice paper-thin. The words struck deeper than the bullet. Ethan knelt, lowering the Winchester. Up close, the figure was unmistakably female, perhaps 19, eyes wild yet pleading. Rope burns welted her wrists. Blood darkened the seam of her flannel shirt, where cracked ribs rose and fell on shallow breaths. "I won't send you anywhere," Ethan said, tone gentler than he'd used since burying his wife and son. "Can you stand, miss?" She tried, failed, and winced, arm clamping to her side. Ethan caught her before she toppled, surprised by her lightness and by the jolt of protectiveness that flared in his chest. "Name's Amelia Brooks," she managed half-conscious. "I'm Ethan Carter. You're safe, for now." Yet even as he spoke, the assurance, movement on the ridge stole his eye. A lone rider atop a black gelding, surveying the cabin against the rising sun. Ethan's grip tightened on the rifle. The rider lingered a heartbeat, long enough to promise trouble, then wheeled away, hooves thundering north. Ethan exhaled a plume of frosty breath. Shelter the beaten girl first, he told himself. Face the shadow on the ridge later. But a darker truth whispered beneath that resolve. The moment Amelia Brooks collapsed onto his porch, loneliness ceased to be his greatest threat. The plains had drawn new battle lines, and Ethan Carter now stood squarely between a hunted woman and whoever loaded the rifle that shattered his morning peace. Rain hammered the cedar shakes long past midnight when Ethan woke to a scream that made his scalp prickle. Not the dry, practiced cry of coyotes. This was human, raw, and close. He snatched the Colt from his nightstand and crossed the shadowed parlor. In the barn loft, moonlight poured through a knothole, silvering dust motes around Amelia Brooks as she thrashed in the hay. Fists battering air only she could see. He stayed at the stall door, weapon lowered. "Amelia, it's Ethan. You're safe." Her eyes snapped open, wild, then confused, then wet with ashamed relief. When the shaking eased, she whispered about a cellar, about iron chains and drunken breath. Ethan said nothing. Instead, he laid his duster across her shoulders like a blanket and kept watch until dawn painted the rafters pink. The days that followed softened at the edges. While her ribs knotted back together, Amelia learned to pour coffee without flinching and even coaxed a rusty tune from Ethan's forgotten harmonica. She insisted on helping, skimming cream, chopping onions, hobbling calves. Ethan caught himself smiling more than the wind-worn skin of his face remembered how. Yet peace held the fragility of glass. One afternoon, feathers clogged the yard like early snow. Three of Ethan's prized leghorns lay neck-broken, arranged in a perfect triangle. A single blood-slick spur stood upright in the soil, calling card of Silas Ward's riders. Rage flared hot and sudden, then cooled into a colder thing: resolve. He buried the hens, cleaned his knife, and checked the rifle's action twice. That evening, Amelia helped scrape potatoes at the wash basin, sleeves rolled above the rope scars. "They've found me," she said, voice flat. "Ward never misses a debt, and to him people count same as poker chips." Ethan set the peeler aside. "This ranch is 5 miles from the nearest telegraph and 30 from the railroad. We have time." "Time?" Her laugh was brittle. "Ward posted $50 for me, Ethan. Folks would sell their Sunday souls for half that. He wanted to promise invincibility but chose something truer. Then we'll make every mile between here and town cost them double." The sky bruised violet. They ate supper by lamplight. Rabbit stew again. But Amelia asked for seconds, and that felt like victory. Later she lingered on the porch, tracing the bullet groove on the handrail where his coffee mug had died. "Why help me?" she murmured. He answered honestly, "Because saving what's broken reminds me I'm still alive." Wagon wheels crunched the driveway gravel. A lantern bobbed, revealing Judge Franklin Hayes, spectacles fogged from hard riding. He dismounted stiffly and waved a folded document like a man holding a live snake. "Ethan, we've got trouble brewing bigger than a henhouse murder," he called, voice grave. "Silas Ward's been to the county seat, came out waving a contract that says Amelia belongs to him, and Sheriff Rawlins aims to make it stick come sunrise." Ethan felt Amelia stiffen beside him. The glass of peace had shattered. Only the sharp edges remained. Judge Hayes spread his law book across Ethan's kitchen table, the way a surgeon displays instruments before a risky cut. The flame of the kerosene lamp flickered on Statute 47, Paragraph 3, letters dancing like pit vipers. Hayes, any contract pledging a person for debt is void if coercion is proven and the lone witness is not neutral. Amelia, hoarse. The only witness was Hank Porter, Ward's trail boss. Hayes, smiling thinly. Precisely. But Hayes's finger slid to a harsher line. Petition must be filed in person before a territorial magistrate. That court sat in Lincoln, 3 days ride east. And Sheriff Rawlins would seal every road by dawn. A log popped in the hearth. Outside, willow branches thrashed under gathering storm clouds. Ethan's mind fired like a telegraph key. Routes, rivers, riders, probabilities. "Ward's men will hunt every wagon," he muttered. "We can't outrun them." "Then don't," Hayes answered. "Make them chase a corpse." Silence swallowed the room. Amelia's spoon paused halfway to her lips. "You want me dead?" "Not dead," the judge corrected. "Unaccounted for. If Ward wastes a week dredging creeks, the road to Lincoln opens." Midnight cloaked Willow Creek in ink-black currents and sheet lightning. Rain whipped Ethan's duster as he lashed Pepper, his gelding, to a cottonwood. Amelia emerged from the shadows wearing the same torn calico she'd arrived in, fabric now ghost-pale under moonlight. In her arms she cradled a bundle. Men's trousers, a wool vest, a slouch hat, her disguise for Lincoln. They worked wordlessly. Ethan wedged her left boot in the creek mud, tore the leather, and drove a broken fence picket through it, evidence of a struggle. Amelia shivered but pressed on, draping her shawl over a snag where rushing water could snag it downstream. Each placement felt like hammering a nail into his own chest. Thunder boomed. Ethan reached to steady her, and their eyes locked, fear and faith braided tight. Amelia, if something goes wrong, Ethan, 3 days, capital steps, high noon. I'll be there. She rose on tiptoe, brushed rain-slick lips across his cheek, swift as a hummingbird, and ducked behind brush to don the stolen clothes. When she returned, hat pulled low, she was no one's runaway daughter, just a wiry farm boy with determined jaw. Lightning gave them one blue-white snapshot together. Then the storm swallowed image and sound alike. Ethan lingered after she vanished, scouring boot tracks with a sage branch, arranging the scene a final time. Somewhere downstream, coyotes barked at the rising torrent. He whispered a prayer, half for Amelia's safety, half for the wrath he hoped would find Silas Ward. A branch snapped to his right. Ethan froze, rifle lifting. Fringe silhouetted by lightning stood Hank Porter, rain sluicing off his oilskin. Musket leveled. Porter's grin glimmered shark white. The night detonated in a thunderclap and muzzle flash. The locomotive hissed like an angered beast as it braked into Lincoln Depot, boiler steam curling round Ethan Carter's boots. Across the platform, he spotted a slim farmhand in wool vest and slouch hat. Amelia's eyes beneath a brimful of courage. She offered the faintest nod before melting into the morning crowd. For the first time in 3 days, Ethan let himself breathe. The courthouse smelled of wet overcoats and ink. Oak panels towered overhead, their varnish catching gray light that leaked through rain-streaked windows. Ethan sat beside Judge Hayes at the petitioner's table, hat in hand, pulse thudding in his ears. On the dais, middle-aged magistrate Thomas Hartwell adjusted spectacles and motioned to the witness chair. "Mr. Luke Carter," the clerk announced. Amelia stepped forward, posture square, jaw firm, every inch a determined nephew. Ethan tracked the tremor in her left hand as she took the oath, and pride burned warmer than the pot-bellied stove behind them. Her testimony unfurled steady as a river. Her father's gambling losses, Ward's threat to ruin him, the forced signing with Hank Porter, watching like a vulture. She spoke of nights chained in a cellar, but kept the horror to spare detail, enough to turn the gallery's murmurs into a low growl of sympathy. Hartwell nodded gravely, scribbling notes. Hayes leaned to Ethan, whispering, "We're turning the tide." The tide snapped back without warning. Double doors slammed, echoing like a shotgun. Silas Ward strode in dripping rain, Sheriff Clyde Rawlins at his flank, a bandage crossing Porter's cheek where Ethan's bullet had creased him that stormy night. Towering above them walked Judge Nathaniel Crow, Federal Circuit black robe flapping like a carrion bird's wing. Hartwell rose, gavel halted midair. "This court is in session, gentlemen." Crow's voice cut through murmurs. "Then permit the Federal Circuit to correct a fraud in progress." He produced a warrant sealed in red wax. "For the arrest of Amelia, alias Luke, Brooks and her accomplice, Ethan Carter, on conspiracy, falsifying a death, and theft of property valued at $50. Ward's grin showed wolf-sharp teeth. "And there's the property, Your Honors." He pointed straight at Amelia. "She's no boy. That's my runaway girl." Ethan sprang up, but Hayes's palm pinned him to the bench. The gallery erupted. Curiosity, shock, a few hateful whoops. Amelia removed her hat with deliberate calm, walnut stains streaking as rainwater dripped off her chin. In that small gesture, the disguise fell away, leaving only a battered young woman who refused to flinch. "Your Honor," she addressed Hartwell, voice ringing clear. "Whatever name I answer to, I stand here as a person, not a ledger entry." Crow moved to speak, but Hartwell held a staying hand. "Let her finish." Amelia paced a single step, eyes sweeping farmers, shopkeepers, in-drifters packed along the benches. "Silas Ward believes a contract can buy flesh and spirit the way it buys cattle. He is wrong. I was threatened, beaten, chained. That paper is forged in fear." She lifted her rope-scarred wrists for the room to see. Gasps rippled like prairie wind. Even Rawlins shifted uneasily. Hayes rose now, papers rustling. "I present affidavits from 3 neighboring ranchers," he declared, handing them to the bailiff. "Each swears Mr. Ward bragged of owning the girl, and that Mr. Porter has ridden under Ward's pay for 2 years. By statute 47, that voids the contract." Porter blanched. Hartwell thumbed through statements, gaze sharpening. "Is this true, Sheriff? Was your witness employed by Mr. Ward?" Rollins swallowed hard, sweat beading his temples. "Appears so, Your Honor." "Then the contract is annul," Hartwell pronounced, voice iron. "Miss Brooks is free. Mr. Ward, you are remanded on kidnapping and corruption charges." The gallery erupted. Cheers, boots stomping approval. Deputies moved. Steel cuffs clicked round Ward's wrists. His grin curdled to snarl. As he was led past Ethan, Crow leaned close and whispered, low but unmistakable, "Paper rulings burn, Mr. Carter. Fire's coming." Ethan's blood chilled. Victory tasted thin when laced with that promise of future flames. Across the well, Amelia met his gaze, eyes wide, relief tempered by fresh worry. The law had spoken, but the frontier's shadows still muttered in tongues of smoke and gunpowder, and Ethan knew the fight for tomorrow was far from over. Morning sunlight spilled across the Carter Ranch like warm gold, igniting dew on the buffalo grass and turning every fence post into a glowing brand of promise. Ethan stood at the edge of the porch he'd rebuilt after the winter storms, hands buried in coat pockets, and tried to still the thunder in his chest. Beyond the corral, a white cotton arch rose, draped with prairie roses Amelia had coaxed from thorny stems all spring. Neighbors bustled, tying ribbons, lighting lanterns even though daylight blazed. Their way of insisting celebration outrun every shadow. Ethan's gaze drifted to the cottonwood grove where he'd first scattered Amelia's torn shawl in the creek. Willow Creek itself shimmered just beyond, gentle and harmless now, a reminder of ghosts outwitted. Ward sat in a Lincoln jail awaiting federal trial. Judge Crow had resigned under investigation when telegrams revealed bribes bankrolling his circuit. Fire, it turned out, could scorch the corrupt as easily as any ruling could. Bootsteps tapped behind him. Judge Hayes cleared his throat, more nervous than when facing a courtroom. "Time, son." Ethan nodded, wiped damp palms on his trousers, and stepped into June sunlight that smelled of lilac and horsehair oil. The small crowd quieted as Pastor William Foster lifted his leather-bound Bible. Then Amelia emerged from the farmhouse doorway, dress of cream muslin swirling around her ankles, hair loose except for a single rose tucked behind her ear. Ethan felt the world tilt, first slow, then right itself with new gravity entirely oriented around her. She stopped beside him, fingers slipping into his. Rope scars still ringed her wrists, but they looked faded now, as though sunlight itself were erasing them. Pastor Foster spoke vows. Ethan repeated them, voice clear, steady, astonished at its own strength. When Amelia's turn came, her words trembled once, then leveled like a well-sighted rifle. "I choose hope, not fear, not chains. Every dawn I wake beside you." He knew she meant it with bones and blood. "By the authority vested in me," Foster concluded, "I pronounce you husband and wife." Ethan kissed her under the cottonwood arch, applause rolling like summer thunder across the range. Somewhere a fiddle caught a tune. Neighbors whooped, and goats, uninvited but enthusiastic, bleated harmony. Twilight painted the sky rose red, the newly strung porch swing creaking under their combined weight. Amelia lay against Ethan's shoulder, tracing constellations of freckles on his hand. The air smelled of smoked beef, lamp oil, and honeysuckle. Home. "You still listening for gunshots?" she asked softly. "Old habits," he admitted, "but tonight they're quieter." She shifted, placing his hand on the slight curve of her abdomen, a secret he'd sensed but dared not name. "Come next frost," she whispered. "Little footsteps will join those goats." He closed his eyes, the world shimmered brighter behind the lids. "What shall we call the troublemaker?" "Hope," Amelia said, eyes shining in lantern glow, "because that's what you gave me in the dark." Ethan swallowed the lump in his throat. Beyond the yard the cattle lowed, content. A nightbird called from the sage. Crow's threat, Ward's hatred, the bullet scars on porch wood, none were gone. They simply mattered less than the heartbeat he felt beneath his palm. Stars awakened over Sagebrush Ridge. Ethan Carter, once hollowed by grief, now felt brimful of love, of promise, of the fierce resolve to guard both. He pressed a kiss to Amelia's hair and watched the future rise with every lantern flicker across their land. A horizon wide enough for hope to gallop free.